Today, I want to talk a little bit about how someone could combine retrieval practice and elaboration using multiple choice questions. So, when thinking about retrieval practice, we know that bringing information to mind is extremely beneficial for long term learning. So, producing the answer, like taking a short answer question where you have a question and you just answer from your own mind, or producing the answer just sort of freestyle, like free recall, bringing to mind everything you can remember. And then, of course, there's also multiple choice questions where you get a question, and then there are a number of response alternatives, A, B, C, D, whatever. Your job, or the job of the learner, the test taker, is to determine which of those responses correctly answers the question or is the best answer to that question. Now, we might think that producing the answer from our own minds, like in a short answer question or free recall, would be more beneficial for learning than recognition in multiple choice. And sometimes this could be the case. Actually, if it's very difficult to produce the answer, it might be better to use a multiple choice question so that you can actually accurately see the answer. But there is a trade-off here, right? So producing the answer might be more beneficial than just looking at all response alternatives, A, B, C, D, and recognizing the correct answer. And of course, it's easier to get through multiple choice questions and not really retrieve, because if you're reading and you're not really sure, you might just pick a response or pick the one that seems correct without really thinking it through. So one way that a learner could actually make multiple choice questions really beneficial is to integrate elaboration. Elaboration is all about describing and explaining how things work, making connections, describing similarities and differences, or asking these how and why questions and then finding the answers to those questions. By combining these two, we can actually make multiple choice questions really, really effective. What the learner would do in this case is take a multiple choice question with a number of response alternatives, read through the question, read through all of the response options, A, B, C, D, however many, and then identify which one they think is the correct answer, but importantly, explain, specifically either saying it out loud or writing it down, explain why the correct answer is the correct answer and why each of the other response alternatives is the wrong answer. So by doing this, you are essentially describing and explaining how things work. You're going into depth and making connections about the information. And by being able to explain which responses are incorrect and why, and which response is correct and why, you're kind of changing that multiple choice question into a question where you're being required to retrieve from memory and produce information on your own. So this can be really good if you are a student who has access to a bank of multiple choice questions and you want to use that for retrieval practice, but you don't want to just go through and pick the answer and move on. Maybe it feels better to describe and explain. This could be really good if you are a teacher or an instructor and you're preparing students for multiple choice tests. In multiple choice tests, the students need to get good at discriminating. And so this could help them prepare for those types of tests while also challenging them to describe and explain the content and really demonstrate their learning in a way that's more than just picking an answer and then calculating, how many answers they got correct. This is not to say that multiple choice questions can't be really effective on their own, but by integrating elaboration, we're combining these two strategies to make a strategy that is particularly effective. I'm not aware of any research that's actually tested this exact procedure, but we know that retrieval practice is really effective. And we know that retrieval practice with multiple choice can be really effective. It can be just as good as short answer, depending on the circumstances. And we also know that elaboration in this way, describing and explaining how things work, tends to be effective. And so we don't really need an experiment that tests this exact scenario to assume that it should probably work in a lot of situations. That's not to say that no one should ever do that experiment. Sounds like a really good experiment, manipulating retrieval practice and elaboration in sort of a factorial way. That's actually quite interesting. It would make a great honors thesis or a student project. But we can't wait for every single experiment to be done. At some point, we have to take the information that we have and be comfortable generalizing. We have so much evidence that retrieval practice is effective and a fair amount of evidence that elaboration is also effective, that I think it's safe to say, based on that work, we can combine this, and it should be a really great way for students to learn, especially if what you have access to is a lot of multiple choice questions and you really want to challenge either yourself or your students in this way.